Sure.
Well, I was just thinking of the timing of everything and the fact that I published that book and then 2 months later COVID hit. And the book was all about how do you navigate change that's unwanted, that's thrust upon you? What's the process that we all go through typically to navigate unwanted change? And then I counted up, I think I've coached close to 75 women these last 2 months, asking them, how are you doing? How are you navigating this? How are you leading during and through this crisis? I think this is my 14th webinar. And so what's been cool is after the webinar, I get a lot of stories, typically from women, often those I've coached before, who are sharing stories of how they're noticing that they are not on top of their game. The thing that I realize is that when we're going through a change of this magnitude, that it creates this internal process called transition. And transition begins with an ending, ends with a new beginning, and then and then we're off to the races. However, it doesn't happen automatically. The ending, new beginning, there's often a process we all have to go through. And the thing that I've noticed is that it seems as if we only have about 60% of ourselves available when there's a major change like the one we're going through now. So what I'd love to do is I'd love to just show you the model just so we can acquaint ourselves with that. And then I'm really dying to share stories with you from other leaders, other women I've coached who have actually some fairly humorous, if not scary stories where they've not been on top of their game. So here's the model. So this is in my book, and this is based on 30 years of research working with clients through change and transition. So you'll notice that um, the horizontal axis is time, moving through time. The, the vertical axis is engagement, the level of engagement you feel at work or in your life. Um, Typically, when there's a major change, there's a sense of ending. And the first phase of that is very similar to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on death and dying. The first, there's a shock, which is very much a sense of not being able to take it in, almost like it slides off us, like Teflon. And there's a sense of fog descending, and then denial, which is a mental defense function that we all use if we can just keep something at arm's length for a while. It allows us to just kind of cope, and it starts to dawn on us what's occurring. Then there's anger, which is a perfectly normal response. I'd say that a lot of people on Facebook are kind of hanging out in anger right now, and I would say that that may not be the best strategy because you're just constantly re-triggering your amygdala. Then there's blame. I would say that blame is actually, I don't want to vilify blame. I think if we can blame something, it allows us to postpone having to accept the reality of what's going on. But if we get stuck over long in blame, then it can deter our ability to move to back up the curve. And then angst, synonym for worry. I would say that worry happens when we imagine all sorts of bad things that might happen to ourselves and our family, but our imagination is a great tool, but stops being an ally when it overly fixates on worst case scenarios. And then sadness. I think a lot of people, it's dawning on us, things are not going to be the same again. I was watching Dr. Ryan Burnett's presentation on the PHRA and the public health risk assessment, and that he predicts we'll be dealing with this for the next year, year and a half until we have a vaccine, and that we shouldn't hug, we shouldn't shake hands. Just even the idea of going out to lunch with each other, like how is that going to happen? How can you navigate that? So I imagine a lot of people have been feeling some sadness connected to that. And then the whole idea is to eventually move to acceptance, because there's a lot of power in the ability to say, okay, I've made peace with this. acceptance gives us the power and the resourcefulness to move forward. Because really, when we're immersed in all the feelings, I would say we really have two choices. It's either to resist or to accept. And if we can accept almost on a daily basis, the daily shifting landscape, I think that you as engineers are going to have much more resourcefulness to solve problems, come up with creative solutions, do deep work, all the things required for your job. And then you'll notice on the curve, we're heading back up to the new beginning. And it begins with acceptance, followed by exploration. I would imagine many of you are already there. The 10 women that I interviewed for this talk, I would say are firmly in the space of acceptance and exploration and new insights, every once in a while bumping back over into anger or denial. You're kidding. I can't believe this is happening. So I'm not saying this is a linear process by any means. It's more of it's a visual model to give you a sense of what I've observed the last 30 years working with clients. And then discovery, that's very much a sense of uncovering things. A lot of people are discovering new ways of doing work. Do I want to return to the office full time? Do I want to have opportunities to work more at home now? And I think a lot of us are attempting to navigate that. And then a sense of new purpose. And then we're back into full engagement and into the new beginning. Okay, let's move on. So one of the most, probably the main reason I wrote the book, if I was just being completely candid, is that I wanted to normalize for people who are in transition that when you're in transition, you often aren't going to feel like you're on top of your game. You're going to do weird stuff. It's as if you're only dealing with 60% of your normal smarts, your normal intelligence, your normal bandwidth. And so often people have described to me, it feels like there's a mental fog, that they're distracted, forgetful, drained. So I wanted to share 4 stories that came to me from other women that I've talked to. And I wonder if you can find yourself in any of these. So Holly shared with me that she, right after a webinar that she attended of mine for the Colorado Water Leaders, she said that she was talking to her accountant, and she describes her as a brilliant woman. And she said she was telling her accountant what she'd been experiencing, being forgetful, not on top of her game. And her accountant started laughing. She said, "Man, I have been so flaky lately." She said, "I just have to tell you this story." She said her house had been stinking the last couple of days, so she went to investigate, thinking it might have been a dead mouse. Turns out she took a pot roast out of the freezer 3 days before, set it in the entryway, and forgot about it. And so Holly described it as transition flakiness from an otherwise truly brilliant woman. Another brilliant woman that I had the honor to coach a couple of years ago, her name's Allegra, and she's an environmental engineer, and she got her PhD from Yale. She said that she did a health and safety briefing, and she used my change and transition model for her team. She was talking about the distraction and the mental fog, and she gave a personal anecdote about driving a few weeks ago and not being able to find the brakes on her car. And she said it freaked her out. She said no harm, but it was momentarily frightening. She ended her team briefing, the health and safety briefing, with a need for creating a personal first aid kit for de-stressing and setting a safety intention before driving or doing other high-risk activities. Karen, who I currently coach, is an engineer and a division director, and she's known for her unbelievable attention to detail. I mean, she's masterful with Excel spreadsheets and emails. I mean, truly a master. Anyway, she revealed to me early on with COVID, she said, "Cheryl, I have to double check every email that I send to catch grammatical errors and unfinished sentence." She said, I feel like my brain is somewhere else. And then finally, Michaela, who's a civil engineer, she said, I had a straight up panic attack. She said, my house is completely destroyed with 4 humans living here. We have 2 adults, a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. And the only thing I can control or attempt to control is trying to keep the house clean. She said, honestly, when this is over, I'm going to park my kids with my parents. We're going to go get 2 hotel rooms. She said, I have got to be able to spend some time alone without anybody needing something from me. So those are 4 stories. I imagine that each of us have got our own about how we're navigating it when we are feeling the added stress, the added worry of not being on top of our game. To the best of my ability, I think the reason for that is our psyche is preoccupied with our safety and our security, and it's constantly scanning the landscape to interpret, are there any threats? Could something go wrong? And that occupies, I would say, close to 35 to 45% of that. Add to that, I would say, as women, and this is my husband's example, I need to give credit. We were talking about this the other day, and he's an instructor in heart math, which is a technique to get yourself out of stress and to do heart-centered breathing, where you breathe deeper than usual and slower so that you lessen the cortisol levels in your body. You return to coherence and peace. Anyway, he was sharing that he feels like um, it's almost like all of your family members and coworkers have got a debit card on your account, and they're constantly charging everywhere, and definitely making withdrawals from your account. And he was referring to that as an energy drain. That when people are making withdrawals, it's harder to keep your account balance in the positive, right? And we can end up feeling broke, depleted, exhausted, frustrated, and even angry. Well, I think part of what's going on is that we thought this was going to be a sprint when this first happened. Yeah, this is going to last for a couple of weeks, just like the flu. We'll be fine. We'll be back. Well, I think what it really has become is more of a marathon. Don't you agree? What I know about a marathon is that you have to pace yourself along the way. You have to replenish yourself with food and things that energize you so that you can finish strong. What happens, I think, and I don't want to, I'm always hesitant to say from a woman's perspective because I don't want in any way label those of us who are women, but I do think that we have a tendency, which I think is actually really noble, to be focused on altruism and selfless service and being a servant leader, maybe even being self-sacrificing. I think there's a nobility and a goodness to altruism. I truly do. However, that can backfire if you aren't replenishing yourself along the way. And so when you put yourself last over and over and over again, you end up running on fumes. And what happens is we're not as resourceful. We have stress reactions. Like we're grouchy, we're cranky, we're resentful. We can start to feel like a public utility, like we're just giving to everyone else. What about me? And so I actually think that it's not just a nicety, it's actually a prerequisite. It's essential for us to focus on replenishing ourselves so that we can give to others, replenishing ourselves so we can finish strong with this marathon. So in my book, I've got 5 different things I talk about, and I refer to this as being in the in-between zone. It can actually happen at any time. But the first one is replenishing rituals. So what is that? I ask you to stop and think, what could you do throughout the day that would maybe take 10 minutes to recharge your battery, to refill yourself with energy? The key is for it to be quick, for it to be efficient, to be able to do it in 10, maybe 15 minutes, almost like a morning break, a lunch, and an afternoon break. I think there's wisdom in how the workday is set up. So examples of replenishing rituals that other people have shared with me is, well, my favorite actually is a cup of tea. I lived in Ireland for 3 years, and just luxuriating with a cup of tea is a consummate delight. Another is music. A lot of people are finding music to be a way to lift themselves up and out and to recharge their battery. Others have shared that quiet time without distraction, having an opportunity to meditate is really lovely. Getting out and walking, being in nature, incredibly helpful. But again, if you can think of something that only takes about 10 minutes, you'll do it more. My all-time favorite is is getting my face in the sun. So if I can find a window or it's nice enough now I can actually go outside, I will literally just close my eyes and drink in the sun. It feels like I'm pouring vitamin D into my body, and that works for me. It's replenishing, and I feel recharged and ready to go back. So in a moment, I'll be asking you, what are your replenishing rituals? What are you doing as a strategy to take impeccable care of yourself? Another one is carving out time for yourself. I think that we, as typically overgivers, but from an altruistic standpoint, may not carve out time for ourselves. A lot of people are actually scheduling adult timeouts to be able to take a break, take a nap, get away from it, especially if you've got young children at home. Boy, it's especially needed. Give yourself recognition is another thing that I would suggest. I would say this is, well, we all know it's an unprecedented time. I would say it's one of the most challenging times to lead. And there's so many people that need us. I certainly learned that with the 10 interviews that I did with many of you who are on the call. So how can you give yourself recognition? Gosh, there are so many different ways. You can have a self-dialogue and say, wow, Christine, I'll use you, Christine. Wow, Christine, you did such a good job. You cleaned out all the areas of your house. Well done. Or you might be attempting a fitness routine and you worked out with weights in your home, and it's a chance to say, good job. That took some discipline, that took some willpower. Atta girl. So give yourself recognition. It's amazing how that fills the tank. Then cultivate your inner advocate. Wow, I bet a lot of us have a well cultivated inner critic, the sort of mean, bullying voice inside our head that says hateful things, judgmental things. That's not helpful during this time. You actually need to banish your inner critic and welcome your inner advocate. That's the part of you that sticks up for yourself, that sets boundaries, that identifies what you need when you need it, and stands up for you to make sure you're taking good care of yourself. And then finally, show yourself compassion. Maybe that's kindness, maybe that's self-soothing, whatever that is. I think we're so good at providing compassion for others. How about we provide it for ourselves? So those are 4 things I wanted to share out of the book, but now I want to share really good stuff because this is directly from many of you. So what you've said, how you've coped with this particular transition, many of you have said you're trying to be gentle with yourself, you're trying to get out in nature, you're attempting to seek out comfortable, familiar surroundings so that there's at least one place where you can feel safe and secure. Um, some of you have said that you've experimented with sharing your thoughts and feelings with those who are supportive and helpful, but you've had a bit of a wake-up call about sharing your genuine, vulnerable thoughts and feelings with people who haven't been that helpful, who are maybe more negative or more toxic. So I would invite you to feel free to set boundaries with people who are an energy drain. I don't think you can afford the luxury of that right now. Many have said that they're having difficulties with concentration, memory, and decision making. Some people have said it's really helpful to focus on easily achievable things first before you dive into the more complex problem solving. It's a mixed bag. Some women have said having a schedule really helps to bring a sense of routine and like this is how it's going to go. Other people have said I've had to let go of all schedules. I've had to just go with the flow. I've had to lower the bar and just take one day at a time. So other people have said to me, they've concurred that cups of tea are marvelous. One of my favorites is, and I just thought about this the other day, are power poses. Are you familiar with this? My favorite is when you actually stand up with your legs out and you've got your just like Superman. Imagine Superman with your hands on your hips and your chest open wide. And if you can just do that for 2 minutes, there's something about it that increases the endorphins in the body. It increases a sense of confidence. It increases a sense of energy. So anyway, power poses, I would say, in the sun would be my all-time favorite. But now I want to share from 5 of our SWE members what they've said have been things that they've done to navigate this time, and what are some of the strategies that they've embarked on to really take good care of themselves and their family. So Tricia said that having family dinners together has been a joy. Being actually home to have family dinners and enjoying being a better mom and spending more time with her 14, 16, and 19-year-old kids. She also said that having a journal to get stuff out of my head and onto paper has really worked well. Christy said that doing a daily instant message check-in with her team, it generates short conversations to connect with each other on non-project related things. She said she's trying to take every Friday off, not always successful with that. Sometimes it's just half a Friday, but something's magical about that because she can decompress and recover and then actually have a weekend on Saturday and Sunday. She said she's watching more webinars than she usually would, and she's enjoying her husky Labrador rescue dog, Maybelle, enjoying her company. I loved her story where she said that Maybelle would come up to visit her and then down to visit her husband, and it's really been fun to have an opportunity to interact with her. She also said pausing, reflecting, and making conscious decisions on what I eat and attempting to find comedy or humor everywhere. Pam was quick during COVID to find her support network. She said, you've got to give yourself permission to have slack somewhere, whether it's household chores, whatever, but give yourself permission to let go. She said, I like to find good friends, good trusted friends to vent with, something really healthy about getting it out of you so you don't have to dwell on it. She said, you got to give yourself permission to not get stuff done and go ahead and feel bad about it if you need to, and then let it go. You have to understand that you're doing the very best that you can. She said, as women, we have to band together. We're more supportive of each other now, she feels, and way less judgmental. That's such good news. She said, you have to deal with the guilt of never doing enough at work or at home. It's like, come on. Again, you start to feel like a public utility. She didn't say that. I'm saying that. And we had a great conversation about work-life balance. And we both decided it was a cruel setup of expectation that somehow we're being measured or judged by having work-life balance. We both decided that was a fallacy in thinking, that the reality is some days, some weeks you'll be better at work and not so great at home. And other weeks you'll be on top of it at home and work suffers. And that's really the reality. I thought, yeah, good. Let's get clear about that. Jen, I love this story. We were talking about Annabelle, her 8-year-old second grade daughter. And Jen said way before the lesson plan came from school, She asked Annabelle, "What do you usually do at school?" And Jen put together Annabelle's own distance learning plan. I love that she set bells, like for every hour, every half hour, that would signal to Annabelle, okay, time to switch from math to English. She tried to replicate it to the best of her ability. But the best part of the story is that she said, "Hey, Annabelle, how about you take on a leadership role and teach your preschool brother Theo? Why don't you do that?" And actually she's doing that, and it's been really successful, and it's given her a new sense of purpose. Caitlin said, "It's so much fun to be able to take her dog for a walk during the day when it's actually nice outside, not at 0 dark 100, not at 5:30 or 6 in the morning." And she also said that she's finding ways to have something to look forward to when when this does come to an end, and being able to get together with friends, all the stuff that we all took for granted before. She keeps her sights on that. Isn't that great? So I'm going to be asking you in a moment, what are you doing? But before I do, I want to share an article that Mike Washer from Merrick sent to me. I thought it was crazy good timing because it's the psychology of leading during a crisis. And so I'm a psychology major, communications major too, but I'm always intrigued as to looking at the psychological aspects of leadership. And so the article talks about vision. That's not a surprise to any of us, that a vision will inspire and move people, and a leader gives us hope through her vision. We know that, don't we? But what I had never heard of before was the psychological concept of holding. And holding is the way a leader contains and interprets what's happening in times of uncertainty. It's the ability to soothe distress and help others make sense of a confusing predicament. I feel like when I interviewed the 10 women for this talk, all of them were holding in this way. A leader has to reassure that we have the resources available to weather the storm. They have to be able to give us clear direction about how to move forward. So holding, there are really 4 components to it. And I'm willing to bet you see it in yourself. Holding is thinking clearly, offering reassurance, orienting people to the future, and helping them stick together. When leaders hold, mutual support abounds, work continues, and a new vision eventually emerges. When they can't hold, you'll see outbreaks of anxiety, flare-ups of anger, and fragmentation ensues. So the article went even deeper into holding when you're a mother or when you're a father. And I thought, since we're looking at this from a woman's perspective, this might be particularly salient. So Donald Winnicott, who's a British psychologist, said that holding is necessary for healthy growth in children. The parents who provide a holding environment are available but not demanding, reassuring but not intrusive, responsive but not reactive, present even if not perfect. Well, couldn't I just put the word leader in there? Leaders who provide a holding environment are available but not demanding, reassuring but not intrusive, responsive but not reactive, present even if not perfect. Who's perfect right now? Who's perfect ever? But I would say now, especially, there's heightened vulnerability, there's embarrassment sometimes about losing it, not being on top of our game. Um, I think this is food for thought. So what happens is, if you approach this kind of parental holding, it makes children comfortable and curious. I would say it makes those we lead comfortable and curious. Children develop a robust sense of self, a healthy regard for abilities and limitations, a self that can learn, play, work, face hardships, and sustain hope through it all. They become more independent and autonomous as grown-ups, and they learn to hold themselves and others too. So